My family disowned me for buying a truck instead of paying for my brother's master's degree. You don't deserve to carry our last name, said my mother. 3 days later, I saw my brother driving it. What he did next forced me to call the police. I'm Mateo, 27 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I thought my family at least tolerated me. I've always been the one getting my hands dirty, working as a mechanic in a shop, while my older brother, Carlos, was a family favorite. My parents, Susan and Robert, always said Carlos was going to be someone important, a big entrepreneur or something like that. I was just there to help him shine. Ever since we were kids, everything revolved around Carlos, his grades, his awards, his future. I was expected to stay quiet and go along with it. A few months ago, I decided to do something for myself. I was tired of spending my paycheck on rent and living for other people's plans. I saw videos of people living in converted vans and thought it was perfect. I could save money, have my own space, and maybe even travel a bit. I found a 2018 Ford Transit in a car lot. It wasn't new, but it was in good shape, and as a mechanic, I knew I could keep it running. I saved $1,000 to buy it and was thrilled. It was the first thing I'd done for myself in years. I told my parents about it one day at their house in Ohio. We were in the living room, my mom reading a magazine, my dad watching a football game. I knew they wouldn't like it, but I didn't expect them to react the way they did. Mom, Dad, I'm buying a van to live in, I said, trying to sound calm. It's a way to save money and have something of my own. My mom put down her magazine and looked at me like I'd said something awful. Live in a van? Were you a bum? Do you want everyone talking about us? It's not being a bum, I replied, keeping my cool. It's practical. I can work, save, and not throw my money away on rent. Lots of people do it. My dad turned off the TV and gave me a serious look. And the money? Don't tell me you use your savings for that nonsense. Yes, my savings, I said, starting to get angry. I worked hard to earn that money. That's when they exploded. My mom stood up yelling, "Your savings? Do you know how much Carlos's master's degree costs? $30,000. We thought you were going to help him. He's your brother, Mateo. He has a future, not like you, who wants to live on the street." That hurt. It wasn't the first time they made me feel like less, but this time it was worse. I don't have to pay for Carlos's degree, I said, trying not to yell. He can work or get a loan. I want something for myself, too. Selfish, my mom screamed. You've always been selfish. Carlos is the pride of this family. You don't deserve to be with us if you think like that. My dad didn't say much, but his look was pure contempt. If you buy that van, forget about us. Don't expect a dime or a place in this family. I stood there, not knowing what to say. I felt a knot in my chest, like they were kicking me out of my own life. Then my mom finished it off. If you go through with this, you're out of the will. We don't want someone like you here. I left the house without a word. It was dark outside, and I drove my old Chevy to shop. I slept on the office couch, thinking about everything. Part of me wanted to give in, hand the money to Carlos, and keep being a good son, but I couldn't. I was done living for them. The next day, I went to the lot and bought the van. When I drove it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. I spent weeks fixing it up. I added a mattress, a portable stove, and some solar panels for power. Every addition made me feel like I was building something of my own. My parents didn't calm down. Every time I tried to talk to them, they ignored me or said I was dead to them. But what I didn't expect was what Carlos did. One day, while I was working on the van outside the shop, he showed up with a smile I didn't recognize. "Hey, Mateo," he said, eyeing the van. "This is cool. I like what you're doing. Don't listen to Mom and Dad. They're overreacting." I looked at him, skeptical. Carlos was never the supportive type. He was always too busy being perfect. "Really?" I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. "Yeah, man," he said. "Live your life. I've got your back." I didn't fully buy it. Carlos always wanted something in return, but I didn't say anything. Over the next few weeks, he started coming by more often. We talked about normal stuff, the shop, cars, some movie. It was weird, but not bad, until one day, while we were drinking sodas, He said something that made me think. "You should park the van near Mom and Dad's house," he said, like it was obvious. "It's a safe neighborhood, and you'd be more at ease. Plus, maybe you'll convince them you're not a mess." I looked at him, tried to read him. Near their house? I don't think they want to see me. Carlos. "Trust me," he said with that smile of his. "It's for the best. I'll make sure they don't bother you." I wasn't convinced, but I ended up agreeing. My parents' neighborhood was quiet, with cameras on some houses, and I thought it wasn't a bad idea. Plus, I wanted to believe Carlos was being sincere. So I moved the van and parked a block from my parents' house on a street where it wouldn't bother anyone. The first few days were fine. I worked at the shop, came back to the van, and felt at peace. But I couldn't shake a weird feeling. Carlos was coming by too often, and his questions were odd. "Where do you keep the keys? Did you put an alarm on the van?" Every time he talked, I felt something was off. One morning, everything went to hell. I went to grab a coffee a few blocks away, leaving the van parked. When I came back, it was gone. My van, my home, everything I'd built, gone. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I ran to my parents' house, thinking maybe they knew something. I knocked, and my mom opened the door with an annoyed look. "What do you want, Mateo?" "Ma, my van's gone," I said, almost out of breath. "Do you know anything?" "I parked it nearby." "We don't know anything," she said coldly. "And don't come bothering us with your problems." My dad appeared behind her. "You brought this on yourself. Don't come crying to us now." I couldn't believe it. My van had vanished, and they acted like they didn't care. I left, furious, and went straight to police. I filed a report, gave all the details, the model, color, license plate. They said they'd do what they could, but these things take time. I went back to the shop, feeling like an idiot for trusting Carlos. 2 days later, while I was at the shop trying not to think about the van, my phone rang. It was my friend Lucas, a guy I grab drinks with sometimes. "Mateo, you busy?" he said, his voice odd. "No, what's up?" I replied, "I just saw your van. It's about 10 minutes from your house, in a parking lot. But something's weird. Someone else was driving it." My heart skipped a beat. I was still processing the van's disappearance. And now Lucas was saying this. "Someone else? Where exactly is it?" I asked, grabbing my keys. "In the supermarket parking lot, the one near the main avenue," Lucas said. "I'm not sure, but the guy driving it looked familiar. I don't know, Mateo. You better check it out." "Thanks, I'm on my way," I said. Hanging up, my mind was racing. Who the hell was driving my van? Part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake, but the other part suspected something bad. Carlos's weird visits, his questions about the keys, it was starting to add up. I drove my old Chevy like a maniac, dodging cars and cursing at every light. When I got to the supermarket parking lot, I slammed on the brakes and started looking. There it was, my Ford Transit, parked in a corner, shining under the sun like nothing had happened. I felt a mix of relief and rage. I approached slowly, trying not to draw attention, and then I saw him. Carlos, my own brother, sitting in the driver's seat, talking to some guy I didn't recognize. I froze. I couldn't believe it. Carlos, the one who said he supported my decision, who convinced me to park the van near our parents' house, was there in my van. I crouched behind a car so they wouldn't see me and try to listen. I couldn't catch everything, but I heard bits. "It's a good van," Carlos was saying, with that salesman voice he used to impress people. "I've got it for a good price, $15,000. Perfect for someone who wants to travel or live in it." The other guy, a man in a cap and an old t-shirt, seemed interested. "Let me think about it. It's yours? You got the papers?" "Yeah, everything's in order," Carlos replied without hesitation. "Let me know soon. I've got other people interested." I wanted to scream, run over, and drag him out of the van. But something stopped me. If I confronted him now, he'd say it was a misunderstanding, that he just borrowed it. My parents would offend him, as always, and I'd look like the one overreacting. No, if Carlos wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures from where I was Carlos talking to the guy, the van, the license plate, everything. Then I remembered something. The security camera I'd installed in the van. It was a cheap one, but it recorded everything inside and outside. If Carlos had been driving it, the proof would be there. I waited until the guy left, and Carlos got out of the van. I watched him walk to his own car, a sedan our parents had bought him, and drive off like nothing. I approached the van, checked that no one was around, and used my spare key to get in. Everything was as I had left it, except for some soda cans on the floor that weren't mine. I went straight to the camera, pulled out the memory card, and pocketed it. I didn't want to check it there. I needed a safe place. I drove back to the shop, still shaking with anger. I hooked the card to my laptop and started watching the footage. It was all there. Carlos getting into the van the morning it disappeared, using a key I don't know how he got. I saw him driving, talking on the phone, even laughing as he parked at the supermarket. There were hours of video, enough to prove it wasn't a mistake. My brother had stolen it and was now trying to sell it. I felt a mix of disgust and sadness. Carlos had always been the favorite, but I never thought he'd stoop this low. I decided not to do anything yet. If I let him keep going, he might actually try to sell the van, and that would be a bigger crime. I could catch him red-handed. I saved the photos and videos in a folder, made copies on a USB drive, and made sure everything was secure. That night, I drove the van back to the shop and hid it in the garage. I didn't want Carlos to know I'd recovered it. If he was going to play dirty, he had to think he was still in control. The next day, I went to my parents' house. I wanted to see how brazen Carlos was. If he'd say anything about the van. I knocked, and my mom opened the door with her usual annoyed look. "What do you want now?" she said, crossing her arms. "Just came to see how you're doing," I lied, "and to ask if you know anything about my van." "We don't know anything," she said coldly, "and don't come with your drama." Before I could respond, Carlos came out of the kitchen with a smile that made me want to wipe it off his face. "Hey, Mateo, what's up? How's it going?" I looked at him, holding back the urge to yell. "Not great. My van's gone. You know anything?" He played surprised. "No way, that sucks. Did you go to the police?" "Yeah," I said, staring at him. "They're investigating. There are cameras in the neighborhood, so they'll find out who did it soon." For a split second, I saw a flicker of nervousness in his face, but he covered it quickly. "That's rough, man. Hope they find it." I didn't say more. I said goodbye and left, knowing Carlos was in deep. For the next few days, I kept an eye on him from a distance. Lucas helped, keeping his eyes open for anything weird Carlos might do. Meanwhile, I reviewed the camera footage again, making sure everything was clear. I also looked up online how laws about theft and selling stolen property worked. If Carlos sold a van, it wouldn't just be theft. It'd be fraud. The consequences would be much worse. A couple of days later, I saw Carlos pull up to my parents' house in his car, grinning ear to ear. I parked a few houses away where he couldn't see me and went inside like nothing was up. My parents were in the living room, and Carlos was talking to them, all excited. "Good news," he said, sitting on the couch. "After a lot of work, I got the money for my master's degree. I'm enrolling next week." My mom hugged him like he'd won a prize. "That's my boy. I knew you'd do it. How'd you manage that?" I asked, leaning against the door, feigning curiosity. Carlos looked at me, a bit tense. "Worked hard, sold some stuff, effort." I nodded, saying nothing. I knew exactly what stuff he'd sold or tried to sell. My parents didn't notice anything off. They were too busy praising their star son. I left the house, feeling a rage I could barely control, but I also knew I had the upper hand. Carlos thought he'd gotten away with it, but I had the evidence. That afternoon, I went to the police station. I brought my laptop, the USB with the copies, and the photos I took. I explained everything, how the van disappeared, how I found Carlos driving it, and how he was trying to sell it. The officer, a serious but kind guy, reviewed the footage and nodded. "This is solid," he said. "With this evidence, we can proceed. If your brother tried to sell it, that's a serious crime. We'll We'll investigate, but we need more details about the buyer if you have them. I don't know who the guy was, I admitted, but I have photos of him and the exact time they talked. There are also cameras in the supermarket parking lot. You could check those. Good work, the officer said. We'll keep you posted. For now, don't say anything to your brother. If he thinks we're on to him, it'll be easier to catch him. I left the station with a strange feeling. On one hand, I felt I was doing the right thing. Carlos had betrayed me, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. But on the other hand, I couldn't help feeling bad. He was my brother, after all, and my parents, who always defended him, had no idea what was going on. Part of me hoped they'd change when they learned the truth, but the other part knew they'd probably blame me, as always. I went back to the shop, hid the van in the garage, and sat down to think. I had the evidence. The police were on my side, and Carlos didn't suspect a thing. But I still wasn't sure how to handle what was coming. I knew when the police acted, my family would turn against me even more. And while I was ready to face them, I couldn't help wondering if it was worth it. That night, staring at the shop ceiling, I made a decision. I was going to see this through not just for the van, but for me. Carlos had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let him walk all over me again. The next few days were torture. I kept the van hidden in the shop's garage, checking my phone every 5 minutes for police updates. I didn't tell anyone, not even Lucas, because I didn't want Carlos to suspect anything. Every time I thought about him, his fake smile while trying to sell my van, I felt a burning rage. But I also knew I had to be patient. If everything went as planned, Carlos would pay for what he did. One morning, while I was fixing a carburetor at the shop, my phone rang. It was a police officer. "Mateo, we're ready to move," he said. "We found the guy who talked to your brother, and he confessed Carlos offered him the van with your evidence. It's enough to arrest him. Do you want to be there?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I want to be there." They gave me the address, my parents' house. No surprise there. Carlos was still living like a king, taking advantage of my parents treating him like he was untouchable. I drove there, my heart pounding. When I arrived, I saw 2 patrol cars parked outside. I stayed in my Chevy, watching from a safe distance. I didn't want to get involved until necessary. Minutes later, I saw Carlos come out of the house handcuffed, escorted by 2 officers. My mom was at the door, screaming, "What's going on? Let my son go." My dad stood behind her, looking confused. Carlos, for the first time, didn't have that smile. He looked scared, and I won't lie, I felt a small satisfaction. I got out of the car and approached. One of the officers recognized me. "Mateo, want to explain?" I nodded and looked at my parents. "Carlos stole my van," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I caught him driving it, trying to sell it. I have photos, videos, everything. The police confirmed it with the guy who was going to buy it." My mom looked at me like I'd slapped her. "How dare you? You're lying. Carlos would never do that. You provoked him, Mateo. You've always been a problem." "A problem?" I replied, losing my patience. I worked years for that van. It was my home, my life. And Carlos took it like it was nothing. And you always defend him, no matter what he does. My dad stepped forward, pointing at me. "You're selfish. If you'd helped your brother with his master's degree, none of this would have happened. This is your fault." I couldn't take it anymore. The fault is Carlos's for stealing and yours for letting him think he can do whatever he wants. I'm done arguing. I turned and walked back to my car. My mom's screams followed me. But I didn't look back. The officers took Carlos away, and I knew there was nothing left to say. My parents would never change. They'd always see Carlos as the victim and me as the villain. That night, Lucas invited me to stay at his apartment while everything settled. I accepted, grateful to have at least one friend who didn't judge me. The next few days were a whirlwind. I went to the police station several times, handing over more copies of the evidence and signing papers. The guy who was going to buy the van confirmed everything. Carlos had offered him a quick cash deal, no questions asked. With that, the camera footage and the photos, the case against Carlos was solid. A couple of weeks later, The officer called. "Good news, Mateo. Your brother took a plea deal. He admitted to the theft and the attempted sale. He won't go to jail, but he has to pay a fine and reimburse you for the van's value. He'll also be on probation for a year. And the money?" I asked. "It's settled. They'll transfer $18,000 to you this week. The van's still yours, but if you want to sell it, that's your call." I hung up, feeling a weight lift. It wasn't just about the money. It was about knowing Carlos didn't get away with it. When the money hit my account, I didn't think twice. I sold the old van. It didn't feel like mine anymore after everything, and used the money to buy a new one. This time, a 2020 Ram ProMaster, bigger, with a better engine. I decked out with everything I'd wanted: a comfier bed, a portable shower, and more powerful solar panels. It was like starting fresh, but better. I moved into Lucas's apartment while I finished fixing up the new van. He was a lifesaver, letting me stay rent-free, and even helping me install some stuff. We talked about everything that happened, and he couldn't believe how far Carlos had gone. "Your brother's an idiot," he said one night over beers. "But you, man, you're a damn genius. You caught him like in a movie." I laughed, something I hadn't done in weeks. I just did what I had to. My family, on the other hand, cut off all contact. My mom sent me a message saying I was a disgrace, that I never should have gone to the police. My dad didn't say anything, but his silence was enough. Part of me hoped they'd at least acknowledge Carlos's mistake. But no, they were still blind, and I didn't have the energy to try to change them. Over time, I started enjoying my new life. The new van was everything I dreamed of. I parked it in quiet spots near parks or lakes, and worked at the shop during the day. I saved money faster than I expected because living in the van was cheap. I even started planning a small trip, maybe to the mountains. Lucas was in, saying he wanted to try van life for a weekend. One night, while I was in the van looking at the stars through the window, I thought about everything that had happened. My family turned their backs on me, but I didn't regret a thing. I'd fought for what was mine, and I won. Carlos faced consequences, even if my parents never saw it. For the first time, I felt like my life was mine, not Carlos's, not my parents', but mine. I don't know what'll happen with my family. Maybe one day they'll talk to me, maybe not. But I don't care anymore. I have my van, my job, my plans, and that's more than enough.